Alright, welcome to Reading Blood Doping. This is an article we'll get a chance to go more in depth on later, but for the time being, you should be able to read about the article here and answer the questions below. I'll go ahead and give you a brief overview in this video and expect you to read the whole article in order to get a better understanding of what's going on. Essentially, this article is talking about cyclists who use methods to cheat. Cyclists can use lots of different methods to cheat, including drugs like steroids to increase the rate at which their muscles grow so they can become stronger or faster. But one of the older methods that even famous cyclists like Lance Armstrong used is a process called blood doping. The way blood doping basically works is you take blood out of your body with a needle and a bag, just like you see in a hospital, and you chill it for later. And then, just before a race, you take a needle and inject the blood back into your body. And so you have more blood than you normally would. This is important because your blood has these things called red blood cells, which you're familiar with, I'm sure. Red blood cells are kind of like the transporters of nutrients in your body. We've talked about it before when we talked about the circulatory system, and I'm not going to go too in-depth to it here in this video unless you want to read about it in the article. But essentially, when you have more red blood cells in your body, they can transport more nutrients. So when you're working out and working really hard, all the oxygen you breathe is being carried away by more red blood cells than it otherwise would be, because you have more blood in your body than you normally would. It has its own risks and dangers, which you can read about at the bottom of the article. It even says right here, dangerous side effects, and a couple other facts you can look into. Once you're done reading through this article, you can answer the questions and follow along with the prompts they have for you before moving on to the next section by clicking this next button. In the second part, they want you to look at what's going on in a blood dope person versus a normal person and explain the difference. I've already put this part in because it's pretty self-explanatory if you can read the graph, and by that I mean this image. And if you can't, I'll go through it with you right now. Explain what the diagram, that's this picture, shows about how doped blood cells are different from normal blood. So when I looked at normal blood, I see that there's this yellow fluid. This is called cytoplasm. I'm sorry, it's called plasma. Cytoplasm is when the cells, my mistake. This is called plasma. Plasma is what carries the red blood cells from place to place. And as you can see, the red blood cells float along in it. So when you take blood out of your body and you put it back in, you fill it up with more red blood cells, as we can see here. So what's the difference between normal blood and doped blood? More red blood cells in the veins of the blood doper. So the person who's being doped has more red blood cells. That's simple. And for the third and final part, you're going to make some predictions. So, use what you've read to make predictions about an athlete who is blood doping. If needed, you can look at the article below with below the questions for evidence to support your predictions. So we're going to make predictions just like we did in the warm-up. We're going to take guesses, and we can use evidence from this article to help us with that. Let's read the first question together. How will the amount of oxygen in the circulatory system be different in an athlete who is blood doping compared to a normal athlete? And then how would the amount of oxygen absorbed by the cells be different in an athlete who is blood doping compared to a normal athlete? The first one I'll leave to you to answer, and we'll talk about the second one now. How would the amount of oxygen absorbed by the cells be different in an athlete who is blood doping compared to a normal athlete? In this case, an athlete who is blood doping would absorb more oxygen than normal. This is because they have more red blood cells, which would absorb more oxygen. So in other words, if I had fewer red blood cells, I could only absorb, say, 10 oxygen molecules. But if I had way more, if I had like 20 or 30, I could absorb 3 times as much oxygen. So what's the difference? The difference is that a doped athlete would absorb more oxygen per cell because they have more cells to do it. And a normal athlete would absorb them at a less rate, at a lower rate, a normal athlete's rate of absorption. All right, once you've finished this prediction, and the first one, don't forget, you can go ahead and click the hand in button, and then move to step 5, the modeling tool, where we model an athlete who is blood doping.